There was war that broke out, a missile flying over, my mom holding me, and we ran into the bunker. Early in medical school, I was obviously trying to do the research, but something personal hit us pretty hard, which is my aunt was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. And the women who were the most pessimistic, cynical, angry were more likely to get cancer and heart disease. What I found in the biotechnology field at these big pharma companies is a lot of desire to make money.
An abundance of money doesn't guarantee happiness. Cancer medicines being unaffordable. It's a very typical, understandable outcome of capitalism.
Practices at the heart of Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism. You're building that higher part of your brain, which turns out it has a name. It's the central executive network.
People are trying to understand like God or the universe. How does it work? What is consciousness? Or what is this kind of intelligence that kind of manages this whole thing? To get to that, the initial state is to control your own mind. This is part of Dreamer series, where we delve deep into human psychology to make sense of people. Today's guest is Hosein, a scientist who has over 20 years of experience in cancer research and development. He has also written many incredible books on human ego and its effect on your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. Please feel free to watch it till the end, and as you do it, feel free to subscribe. It means a lot to me. So, Hosein, what is your first memory in life?
Wow. Very deep question. First memory that I remember is being with family in Iran, in Tehran. I was born in Tehran in 1979. And so my first memory is really with family, although there were some memories I have of a very difficult time. At the time in Iran in 1979, there was a revolution, there was war that broke out. So I remember very challenging memories, difficult times. I don't know exactly what was happening, but it was a time of difficulty and I could sense that. And those traumatic memories, those are the ones that really get solidified in our minds. So yeah, I have a memory of, a missile flying over, my mom holding me, and we ran into the bunker. I just, glimpses of that, and just overall, very, very difficult times, yeah.
And maybe a bit violent as well. As a child looking at the world, it feels a bit a violent beginning to start from. And who was around you at that time? So you mentioned your mom. Who else was around?
Yeah, I mean, all of the extended family in Tehran, my, aunts and uncles and cousins and grandparents. And, it was, the family unit was a very happy, very loving unit, but it seemed like the world was changing, outside. But the family unit was very solid, very happy.
Do you have any siblings, like brothers, sisters?
Younger brother, yeah, 4 years younger, Pyle.
So was he born at that time? Maybe like it's going to be hard to pinpoint, but
he was born in the UK. So my parents, my father worked for an American company. He's an engineer, and he started from the bottom, worked his way up. And when the revolution happened in Iran, all the American companies left, and he really had to start over. And so he wanted to follow his dream to come to America for his kids. And so my brother was born in the United Kingdom as we were moving to the US, because my grandparents lived there in the UK, yeah.
Okay, and so you started the memory of, say, like missiles flying, and you're with your family in Tehran. What happened after that? Did you do your schooling in Iran, or were you by that time already moved?
Yeah, preschool was in Tehran, but basically age 4, we came to the US. We came to Los Angeles, and I started kindergarten here in LA at a public school, and really great memories of childhood here in the US, yeah.
And what do you remember about your friends from back in time? I don't know how the US was back in time in 1980s, Was it like a welcoming place? Was it like friendly place? How was it back in time?
It was friendly, it was welcoming. I had friends who in kindergarten who I'm still friends with on social media. And Los Angeles suburbs, mid 1980s was just a fun time. People were
Mm,
skateboarding and going to arcades, and Nintendo had just come out,
right.
and I had a very diverse group of friends, you know,
Mm,
Caucasian, Asian, Hispanic, African American, and it was just welcoming. And obviously there were differences between all of us, but it was overall a very good, diverse place to grow up. Yeah.
mm. Yeah, I feel like when I ask this question, it also says who the person is because it has to do a lot with your point of view, how what you thought was important, where you wanted to focus at that time. And how was so you were in school in US, and then what about like middle school or high school? What were some memories around that? What was happening at that time in life?
Yeah. So I think elementary school was in the 80s a fun time. There was, new games and new technologies, but in the early 90s here in Los Angeles, it was a very, very turbulent time. We had the LA riots, and we had just
Yes.
a change in the culture here. And
Right.
so there was a rebelliousness that many, of my friends and I, we went through. And so many of us were at the time, dressing a certain way, listening to hip hop, and things were changing very rapidly. Sort of that innocence of the 80s was lost, um and there was, music like Nirvana had come out, music, hip hop
Mm,
and all of that. So there was a changing of the tides. And so by junior high there was a rebelliousness. There was a
mm,
rebelliousness to authority, I feel like.
mhm.
And that went in, took me into high school. Although I got into a little bit of trouble, and I had to make the decision: do I continue down this road with these rebellious friends, or do I stick to, proving myself to my parents who sacrificed so much to come here? And I decided ultimately I needed to focus on academics and head in that direction.
Mm. I think like I don't know exactly what year, but maybe US was coming out of Vietnam War. And there was like I read about it long back. So there was this big shift in people's thinking about the trust in the government and also like overall what is life, what is society. That was a period of nirvana. Like you can see like it's a hippie movement is coming from those side of the world and it's spread across the globe. And many people moved to different Asian countries, settled there a lot of fun documentaries about that or about that period of time. When you were in high school, what do you want to become? Were you having thoughts about which direction you need to go?
Yeah. Funny enough, it reminds me of a dream I had back in the 80s when I was 6 or 7 years old. This is when on the news it was about HIV AIDS, and it was just called AIDS at the time. And I was about 6 or 7 years old. And I remember hearing about this AIDS. I didn't know what it was, but I had a dream of helping people, helping to cure it, helping
Mm,
people. It was obvious there was so much suffering going on. Again, I didn't know exactly what it was, but that dream of helping cure disease, I think, has been with me since the age of 5 or 6. So in high school, um, I knew that, I read a book in high school called The Human Genome Project. It was about
mm,
how we're sequencing our genome. This is going to change our knowledge of ourselves and how we can treat disease. And so in high school, I decided I wanted to head in that direction of helping to cure disease by being on the front lines of, research and development. And so I headed in that direction of wanting to go and do like an MD PhD or something where I can do the
mm.
science and be involved in the medicine. So that's the direction I wanted to go in high school, and which is the direction I'm still in.
So you always had that direction in life, and you have always been in that journey in a sense. You thought about this is where I want to be, close to medicine, close to technology, and you have always kept yourself on the path, which is quite cool. So, what happened after high school? So, you finished your high school, and then what was the choices that came to
Yeah.
you at that time?
So I started college at Caltech over here in LA, California Institute of Technology. And the first week, I think maybe the second day of college, I went into the Human Genome Group. This was a research group there. And I just said, hey, I'd like to work for you guys. and and they welcomed me in and they're like, come on in. At the time they were trying to sequence human chromosome 22. So I helped with that. And they had this library of human DNA, basically, where you can go into this library and try to discover any gene you wanted. And so I was like, huh. So at the time, being, 18, 19 years old, I was trying to look for human pheromone receptors to see if
And
they,
it's very specific pheromone.
yeah. Well, being an 18-year-old boy, I was like,
Yes,
well, maybe
yeah,
if I can discover a human pheromone, I can, be very happy. But it turned out
yeah,
that I did find some of the human pheromone receptor genes, but none of them were working. They were all
yeah.
dysfunctional. It turns out we lost our pheromone receptors a long time ago. We don't have that part of our, it's called vomeronasal organ.
Mm.
Other animals have it, other mammals have it. We don't have it. We lost it. So anyway,
Mm. It's crazy. Like I also read long back about how partners come together, and there was a lot of study about pheromone and how it affects possible partners in the world. Like you have a certain set of genome, and the genome is attracted, or the other person is attracted to a certain kind of mix. So, and it makes sense. The life have to sustain for a longer time, so it goes for certain combinations. But it's cool. It's a cool thing. But I'm also surprised by like when you are 18, 19, the research was quite over there, right? Like there were technology about genome research, about like specific libraries that has this kind of knowledge. So they were already on a path, and they were like going really like focused
yeah,
on genome projects. Mm.
exactly. And so from Caltech, the Human Genome Project was sequenced in the year 2000, and that was announced at the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, and that's where I ended up. So after college, I went to the NIH, and the NIH is
Mm.
really where new medicines are discovered. This is where cellular therapies were discovered. This is a place where patients who have no other options will go. It's in,
Mm.
in Washington, D.C. area, and they'll get treated for free, but these are really experimental medicines. So I was
Mm.
there in the year 2000. I remember, Bill Clinton came out and they announced the Human Genome Project is sequenced. And that was really a turning point, I think, for medicine. Looking back, all of the discoveries we've made since that sequencing
Mm.
of the genome is remarkable. We now understand our genome, how our cells work, how disease, takes hold. So
Mm.
it's been amazing in our understanding of mind and body, basically.
Hmm. And before we go after college, so how was your university? How was your college studies at that time? How was US back in time when you were studying in a college?
Yeah, late 90s, this is when the internet was coming out and, World Wide Web, and I, had my first email address on
Mm.
Telnet, very, very basic, text only type of system. But Caltech was an intense place. It's the place you want to graduate from, but you don't want to be at because it's just so intense. I mean,
Yeah.
we were required to
Mm.
take a quantum mechanics class where on the first day they put this equation on the board, the Schrodinger wave function, which from this one equation you can derive all of life. You can derive all of the atoms,
Yeah.
and it's like it's just a high level of intensity. But I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed that. It's like drinking from a fire hose. At first, fire hose just blasts you, but you get used to it and you drink. And but looking back, you're glad you had that experience.
Yeah, and the kind of people you might be hanging out with, there are also this kind of people who likes playing with fire hose, and like those kind of like ambitious kids who want to do something in life. And that also affects a lot on your trajectory, where you're going to go, because that's the kind of like base point for you. Like, oh, this is the kind of group there is in the world. This is where you should go. And I've seen like many people where they studied, where they did their like, like whatever bachelor's or master's, it does influence where they reach in time. Not always, but a lot of times it does, because you kind of build who you are from your experiences. So you finished your studies. What did you study in Caltech?
Biology. Yeah, we only had a few options. So one of them was biology, and I did my pre-medical studies there. Yeah, in the summers I
Okay.
would go to the NIH to do research.
Hmm. And what happened after you're finishing that in Caltech? So what was the next step in life?
I spent a year at the NIH and the National Cancer Institute, and it was my first time working in the field of cancer oncology. So in the year 2000, and during that year, I was applying for medical school, and I ended up, heading to UCSF the year after. But that was it was a pivotal year, the year 2000,
Hmm.
and 2001. We had this election, this crazy election with the hanging chads and a lot of fun music, and it was a good time. But certainly the following year, 2001, the difficulties I think started in in medical school.
And what would you say as a Hussein back in childhood to Hussein who's there now in finishing the school and going to a medical school? What was the changes that happened in you? Worldview
Mental,
about life? What was the overall change?
yeah. I think growing up, I wouldn't say I was a very happy kid. I had a lot of pressure. Obviously, there was a lot of pressure. There was a lot of expectation from, the first generation coming to the U.S., first person in my family to go to a U.S. school. A lot of pressure
Mm.
to succeed, to validate all of the struggle my, parents went through. So there was a lot of pain growing up, obviously coming from Iran, a place that went through all of the war and revolution, a lot of emotional pain that I held on to, and stress, anxiety, and obviously dealing with the pain and, probably not the healthiest ways. Um,
Right.
and actually, this is ultimately leading to the books I've written, where I've kind of finally processed all of these issues and found a happier place. I am now a much happier and content, fulfilled person now than I was back then. I think I was just, on this journey. I was stuck in the weeds,
Mm.
heading in the direction, and I think I finally gotten there. But it's been a long journey.
Do you feel, I mean, now I'm pretty sure you feel belonged somewhere, but there is always this feeling of where do I belong when you move to a new place, and you are almost born there. You're like 4 years you were in US, so all your life you have been there, but it's always a feeling. I keep seeing this in expats, and at the same time I am an expat as well, like came here 10 years back. So how have that been, like feeling of belonging as you grow up?
Yeah, I think that's one of the. We'll get to this book and the default mode network, but I think one of the hallmarks of someone living in that default mode network is this lack of belonging, which, yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
certainly experienced. But I feel like even if I grew up in the US and I was born here, I still would have experienced that lack of where do I
Mm-hmm.
belong. So, yeah, I definitely struggle with that. And what comes with that, which is loneliness,
Yeah.
another, painful way to live. Um, and I think by coming to really understand this default mode network of ours, which we'll get into, I no longer have those feelings of belonging. That's gone. I think
Mm-hmm.
that was a relic of that part of my
Past.
brain. Yeah, exactly, in the past, which we'll get into that.
And so you finished. So where are we right now? So
Yeah.
you are doing your medicine. So you're done with your biology, you've been doing an internship for a year, and then you started your medicine.
That's right. So medical school, and early in medical school, I was um, obviously trying to do the research, but something personal hit us pretty hard, which is my aunt on my father's side, my father's sister was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer.
Wow.
And so she was alive for about 5 years with that disease, but horrible. I mean, horrible disease to see that. And it obviously pushed me to go into breast cancer research. I did my PhD in it. And I found one of the critical genes in breast cancer, and stayed in that direction basically since that time. I'm still involved in cancer research, drug development. I helped develop new cancer medicine. So medical school, was a continuation. Although in San Francisco, I feel like I really discovered my real, soul there. It's just such a wonderful place, and a lot of fantastic memories of just, driving up to Napa, Sonoma, and the Golden Gate Bridge. And you mentioned, the 70s and, that rich history there in San Francisco. So just a wonderful place. I feel like I really discovered happiness there.
When did you meet your partner? So I know you have 3 children. So
That's
what
right.
time did you meet? Is it during this period of time?
No, Lisa and I met a bit later this is after medical school. Once I began working is when we met. Yeah, so about 14 years ago. But this
Okay.
is after graduating. Yeah.
So you finished your medical school and then you started working. What kind of work did you want to do? Did you get the exact thing that you wanted?
Well, I was, there was, I did a medical school MD degree, a PhD degree, and then I spent some time at the National Cancer Institute again. And the goal was to help patients with cancer. And it's like, how do I make a real impact? And I was deciding whether going into academia, becoming a professor, or becoming just a full-time oncologist, helping patients, or developing medicines. And I decided to go the route of developing medicines. And obviously that happens in companies like biotechnology companies. And so I ended up at a place called Genentech. It's a big biotechnology company working on, cancer, breast cancer, finding new drugs essentially. And had a privilege of working with folks like Napoleon Ferrara, Richard Scheller, and the people who
Top of the
who've led
cream
us.
of the cake.
Yeah, exactly. And so that was in 2009 that I started at Genentech, and since then I've seen many drugs fail. Unfortunately, most drugs do not work, but when 10% of the time a drug works, and it's just amazing. So to see things like CAR T therapy, I don't know if you're familiar with cell therapy, but this is instead of giving a pill, we're giving cells to patients, their own immune cells, and these cells are able to divide and attack the cancer. And so there are patients now cured of their cancer with cell therapy, and this is just the beginning. And there's other therapies coming, so it's a very exciting time.
And where do they take that cells from? So it should be from their own body, right?
They take their own immune cells from their own body. Yeah, there's a process called apheresis. They collect those cells. They basically engineer the cells so they attack the cancer and then give those cells back to the patient. And the cells will go through the body, find the cancer, and attack the cancer, basically. It's pretty amazing stuff.
Yeah, it's so amazing. Like when you explain it like that. Like recently I was reading about this procedure I think it is called PRP. So it's basically using blood plasma and injecting in certain injuries to heal. And so it's kind of works not similar, but like I felt like it was also quite a good technology to have. So they use some specific elements of plasma to call this kind of cells to that spot. Immune response. So they kind of like created an immune response to just for everything to come there. It's like a call to like help. and then they fixed whatever the problem was. So this kind of technologies exist, and it's quite cool. It's a
Yeah,
really good direction.
exactly. It just shows that the human body, can heal itself, has the power to heal itself, but there are some conditions where, um, that healing is disrupted, where like we
Mm.
normally have immune cells that find cancer all the time. I probably have some cancer cells. My immune system is getting rid of it. But for some
Mm-hmm.
reason, some cancer cells are able to get away from the immune system. And so what we're
Mm.
trying to do is to push the immune system back into recognizing that cancer cell. We're sort of allowing the healing process to happen when it's been disrupted, basically, right?
Mm. So you are at this point working full time as someone who is trying to find cure for cancers. And at what point did you feel like, I know you are an author as well, what point did you feel like writing books? And what was the whole idea around that?
Yeah, I think in corporate America, I came in there with a very simple idea. I want to help patients with cancer. What I found in the biotechnology field at these big pharma companies is a lot of politics, a lot of big
Mm.
egos, a lot of desire to make money, and all of
Mm-hmm.
that coming ahead of patients. And it was very
Mm-hmm.
frustrating. It was very frustrating to come in there into Genentech and to say, I want to understand how cells metastasize and spread around the body, and to be given political answers about, well, your role and your function as this level, and it's like, what
Mm.
does that have to do with anything? We're trying to help patients with cancer. So there was this big frustration that we
Mm.
spend a lot of our time in the biotechnology sector talking about politics, talking about
Mm.
bullshit that has nothing to do with patients. I think all of that frustration um, ultimately found its way into these books I've written. And the first two books were novels, and
Right.
those two books were really about innovation and what is
Right.
holding us back from innovating. Uh, and a lot of times it's our own politics and our own mindset that prevents us from innovating. And so that's sort of why I got into writing. This last book, um,
Right.
we can talk about it, but that the motivation there was very different. This was an understanding now that neuroscience is blossoming. We're now understanding the brain, and it has
Mm.
massive implications for our mental health. And so the third book was written purely to help people, not with cancer, although cancer patients will benefit, but to help people with mental health. So, we can get there, but
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that what you mentioned about politics within work and people's point of view on money is more important than patients. I feel like it has to do a lot with the value of a society, about where the world is going. For example, like I was talking to my friend about capitalism, and such a fun thing to talk about, because the whole idea is that a few could get extremely rich by keeping a lot of people under them. And it is definitely a source to improve innovation, because there is a reward in the end. But at the same time, it comes with its own price. Like I could see, like, for example, cancer medicines being unaffordable. It's a very typical, like an understandable outcome of capitalism, because the reason why they are finding this medication is because they need to make money, not to cure people. And these things kind of like ripple in people who works for a certain kind of goal, and that's very different from passion driven innovation and money driven, or like any some like pride driven, whatever it is. It's more like it doesn't come from the heart. It comes
absolutely.
because you feel like there is this big goal to reach, and that might be money, my life getting better. It's very common in all of the world, and mostly in industries that has all these titans, like people who really want to go up. They kind of go against each other because their ideologies are so different.
Yeah, yeah. So there are leaders out there in biotechnology and other sectors who are genuinely passionate about helping people. I've seen many of them. There are those folks out there, but the majority, I would say, like you described, are doing this for money. I don't think it's a conscious decision to pursue money. I think it's an addiction. It's an addiction for money, for title, for status. I call it an addictive craving. It's something that will never bring fulfillment. And I've seen people who've made hundreds of millions of dollars running and selling a company, only to turn around and want to do it again because there isn't a fulfillment there. There is no fulfillment when your goal is to make money. Once you make money, you just want to make more money because there is no inherent fulfillment. And it's more of an addictive craving that you're pursuing that could cause harm, right? And so that is one of the things I talk about in this book.
And you mentioned fulfillment. I feel like everyone is focusing on finding meaning, who they are, and basically self-discovery and what is this world. But at some point, people get like mixed into the drama around, and then they get consumed by the world, and they forget the whole point is to understand you and the world. So, especially with money, I too know a lot of people who has a lot of money. They work very hard. They're very unhappy as well. So it doesn't have to mean like just because money is. I mean, a lack of money could create unhappiness because of lack of security, but an abundance of money doesn't guarantee happiness.
Yeah.
But a fulfilling life, a meaningful life, kind of guarantees because it changes you and your view on the world.
Exactly. So addiction, whether it's, let's say, addiction to money, addiction starts with good intentions, right? People want to make money to, support their families, to have a nice house, to have a good retirement. But during that journey, suddenly the money becomes the purpose in life. And that's when things change. And that's when you lose sight of what was it I was doing all this for? I was doing all this for my family. I was doing all this for my happiness. And at some point, it turns into causing more harm than good. And that creates this, I call it a mental knot that can prevent you from being happy. So that is one of the 11 mental knots I talk about in this book. And it affects many people. And addiction is not just about drugs and alcohol. A lot of people are addicted to title and status and money, and it's a hard thing to get away from. And they're wondering why they're so unhappy. They can't figure it out. Maybe they need more money. But that's about it, right?
Yeah, but let's talk about, I'm very interested in the book. So let's talk about the book. Could you give like an overall view of what is the book about? What is the core message and the principles that you just mentioned?
So the core message of the book is very simple. We have in our brain, as we're understanding now, as neuroscience is telling us, we have at least 7 networks. We're beginning to understand how our brain works. And it has massive implications about our mental health and well-being. And what's amazing is a lot of the truths from a long time ago, truths from Buddha and Jesus and all of the prophets and others, are now coming to light in a very different way in the science. So the book talks about one of those 7 networks, the default mode network, which it turns out is your self. It is the you, the storyline of you that you are creating. And we all need a healthy default mode network to be a functioning person. But for many of us, this default mode network takes over, becomes overactive, and gives us what I call 11 mental knots. I don't call them diseases or conditions. This isn't like you're labeled with a disease and this is your disease. No, these are reversible mental knots, and this default mode network can trap us in a lot of pain. But the point of the book is, by understanding your brain, by understanding yourself and coming to understand and experience this default mode network, you can form a new relationship from it, and you can completely break free from things like stress, anxiety, emotional pain, addictive craving, loneliness, negativity, anxiety, dissatisfaction, poor lifestyle. All of these come about because of an overactive default mode network. And so, it's a book about personal growth, self-discovery, a book about helping you experience and understand your mind.
Yeah, I think like a lot of people have a hard time even understanding who they are, in a sense. because they are kind of overstimulated by the world. So I feel more of like, can you hear me clearly?
Yes, yes.
So I feel like a lot of people are overstimulated with like, like television, their phones, or like basically drama. I have a feeling like people have a tendency to like get pulled into drama, and then they don't really self-reflect on who they are, what they want, where are they coming from, what are their values, and they just like get lost into this spiral. It takes them, I was meeting a few friends of mine. I feel like from external point of view, they have such a good life. And they come from a kind of like a background of the mood. Yeah, the family comes from a very hardworking background, and they are doing quite well for themselves. Both of them have good jobs. They have a home. They have everything kind of someone would imagine to be like a good life, but they cannot stop comparing themselves to others. So whenever I meet them, I could feel that, wow, the kind of negativity that comes out, they don't understand it's negative. They feel like this
Exactly.
is the way people think. But the truth is, you already have everything. You are already abundant with where you are. It's just that you haven't accepted it.
Yeah.
Because you are still on the rat race on like who have more.
Yes.
So I feel like go.
No, you nailed it. So most people don't realize that there is a way of living that transcends all of that, right? So when you're in the default mode network, and when you're living in that state, it is a state of being very reactive to things as they happen, reactive to life, being very judgmental. It's a world that revolves around me. The world, everything is in relationship to me. So as you said, comparing, that is a hallmark of default mode network. It creates loneliness, that competition. So the default mode network is survival. It wants us to survive. It tries to compare ourselves to others. It tries to look ahead to the future and plan how things are going to turn out. It wants life to happen a certain way. There is a completely different way of living. It does not involve the default mode network. It actually involves a different network in the brain called central executive network. When you're in that state, you're separated from your emotions. You can observe your emotions. They don't affect you. You're not reactive. You're living in the present, and you recognize the interconnectedness of all of life. So other folks have called this the enlightened state, and Christians have a term for it, resting in the Lord, right? Buddhists have a term for it. We're all describing the same thing, which is living in a state where you are using your observing mind. You have an expansive consciousness. Life is not about me and I. It's far bigger than me or I. And, and this is non-reactive, non-judgmental, and there's a blissful peace. The kind of blissful peace you see like in a 3-year-old. I've got a 3-year-old. His default mode network hasn't formed yet. He is just present and playful. And life is just playful. Life is just amazing. And so that is the other, the higher self, if you want to call it that. Most people don't realize you can be in that state. It may take a few weeks to adapt yourself to that, but that way of living is amazing.
Yeah, I would say like most of the spiritual paths, they go to this spot where you just explain where you are not you. You kind of understand your place in the world, which is that you are just, if I talk in the metaphysical way, you're just a divine tool to make changes in the world. It's part of a system. And your reward from this is self-understanding. And also the world. So most of the spiritual thinking, or like, for example, if you look at Hinduism or like this kind of practices from back home, the fundamental step you need to reach is to be able to control your thoughts, to be able to like have a distance from you and the thoughts, because only if you do that, you would be able to have that kind of mental energy for things more than that.
Absolutely.
And things more than that is what people are trying to understand, like God or the universe. How does it work? What is consciousness? Or what is this kind of intelligence that kind of manages this whole thing. To get to that, the initial state is to control your own mind.
Just one point. Control. The word control, that's a very important word, because when I talk to people who are really stuck in that default mode network, they struggle with anxiety. When they hear control, they think, oh, I have to control my thoughts, like the way you would control a loud baby, like shushing a loud baby. And it's actually, there's no control, right? What you're trying to do is to develop that observing mind that you can build like a muscle. You can build it to be stronger and stronger. So that observing mind can observe your thoughts, not control them, but observe them come and observe them go, right? The principle of equanimity. And this is something that takes practice. You're not trying to control or restrain your thoughts. You're trying to build this observing mind through mindfulness, through prayer, through equanimity, through practices at the heart of Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism. You're building that higher part of your brain, which turns out it has a name. It's the central executive network.
Yeah, it's fun that when science and religion, spirituality, everything meets, it has a certain kind of depth. Like I would say, like if you look at like people who meditate, I feel like they're much more healthy in a sense, because like we talked a little bit before, your body has the ability to heal, but at the same time, the body is an organism or a system, not an organism, a system that listens to your own thoughts. So if you don't have the right kind of thoughts, the cells kind of respond to it in a different way. There are like a lot of teachers from spirituality who have talked about like the reasons where cancerous things comes in or infections kind of form is because the thoughts cause it in the cell. Because the thought has certain kind of energy that it holds, and you kind of channel that energy into your own body, and then the body kind of go into this mode where because of the negativity it causes certain kind of growth. Whereas if you're very objective or positive, it has the ability to heal as well. So a patient have to believe a lot that they should be hopeful that this is going to work, and that causes a certain portion of its healing itself.
Yeah, you nailed it. So there are a lot of viewers, scientists, doctors, lawyers who want to see the data, right? They say, okay, all of this stuff sounds great, but there's no data. Actually, now there is data. There is data showing that the quality of your thoughts, when you have stressful thoughts, it releases stress hormones and things like cortisol that impact your physiology. That cortisol shuts off, lowers your immune system and allows cancers to take hold. Studies have shown that meditators actually have changes in their brain. Their default mode network activity actually goes down. And so studies are showing on a population level, people who meditate, people who have spirituality and the qualities of spirituality, resilience, compassion, they do better. They live longer. They actually have less, disease. So there was a study of 70,000 women. 70,000 women were followed for 8 years. They had no cancer, no heart disease at the beginning of the study. They followed these women for 8 years. And the women who were the most pessimistic, cynical, angry were more likely to get cancer and heart disease. And they controlling for other factors, the quality of thought was a big predictor of health. And there are multiple studies showing this. So I think a lot of those, I wrote this book really for those skeptical people, those corporate people, the doctors, the scientists who, they want to see the data. Well, here's the data and here's the science and medicine. Look how it's confirming a lot of these really old thoughts from spiritual leaders. It's just amazing.
And I'll tell you another fun thing that I recently kind of understood. So the whole or a good portion of idea in yoga is the control of pranic energy. So they call it pranic energy, but it's basically the life energy. So when you, for example, they say that air is the manifestation of pranic energy from a philosophical point of view. So when you breathe, you are actually breathing energy into you. And at the same time, your life holds a certain amount of energy as well. When you are young, you are kind of not you, you are the world itself, because you haven't formed that network in the head. So the body takes care of the movement of energy. You are kind of the mind that kind of takes care of everything as a kid. So the body has its own intelligence, it kicks in, and the energy is facilitated in a good way. So it's energy cannot be staying in a place. Whatever the energy is, it causes certain kind of growth or certain kind of problems. So it needs to keep moving. When you get older and you have a certain kind of lifestyle, this kind of nerve system starts getting cluttered. And when that gets cluttered, this energy doesn't move. And then it causes diseases.
Yes.
So in a way, it's quite simple, but it's also like very fascinating to think like it's just flow of energy. If you can like move the energy quite efficiently throughout the body, you will be healthy. Even if by thought, if you block it, it would cause diseases.
Yeah. And now we're understanding what happens on the cellular level. So it turns out that you mentioned, let's say breathing exercises, 4-7-8 breathing or other types of deep breathing exercises. They stimulate what's called GABA. GABA is a neurotransmitter. And GABA is actually calms us down. It reduces our thoughts. We need it for sleep. And it reverses the stress response. So now we're understanding the physiology. There was a study at Massachusetts General Hospital. They had, tens of thousands of patients some of whom practiced a relaxation response through deep breathing. And they showed those patients had better outcomes. They were able to recover from their condition in the hospital much better. And it makes sense. When you're stressed or anxious, your breath is shallow. You deprive your body of oxygen. And when you consciously take that deep breath, you actually, you lower the cortisol, you stimulate this GABA, and this GABA can do wonders for you. So that's the simplest thing I think anyone can begin is start some deep breathing exercises intentionally, 10, 15 minutes, and try it and see for yourself how it helps you. Don't take my word for it.
Exactly. And another fun fact, since we're talking about this kind of stuff, according to Hinduism, my parents are Christian, so I don't have anything specific about Hinduism. It's just like a fun way to look at things. They basically say that every life you take, you have a certain kind of karmic depth. From basically it's cause and effect. If it put like in a very like straightforward way. So, and you come with a certain level of knowledge. For example, like the more you live, if you believe in reincarnation, those kind of stuff, the more you live, the way to measure it is basically how well can you control your pranic energy? How well can you control your life energy? Because that is one of the bores. So you live your life, you think about all this kind of stuff, you die, you live again. And through different lives, you have mastered the art of controlling your thoughts and your energy. So, and that is the cycle, and then you progress more and more knowledge comes to you because of the control. But so what I was trying to say is that sometimes I tell people like, it's just stop having these negative patterns in the head.
Yeah.
But it feels impossible for them.
So exactly. And so this book is meant to be very practical and give you very practical exercises you can do. Let's talk about negativity. So our brain is wired to focus on the negative. This is our default mode network. It's how we made it to this point. When we lived in, the jungle and when we lived in the caves tens of thousands of years ago, we were constantly facing threats and predators and famine. And by focusing on the negative, we survived, right? We're in a much different place now, but our brain still wants to focus on the negative. So how do you overcome that? You cultivate something called equanimity. You come to recognize the positive and the negative. And you can do this during a mindfulness exercise where you come to observe your negative judgments. You just observe them, you recognize them, you label it, and you allow it to go on its way. And it's something, initially, it'll be very difficult. You see a negative judgment and completely takes over you. But you keep practicing this week after week, and suddenly after 2 months, you see this negative judgment, you observe it, and it goes away. And that's how you get control of your thoughts, by empowering that observing mind. Loneliness is another one that many of us feel. The remedy for that, so each of these knots has a remedy. The remedy for loneliness is to cultivate compassion, actively cultivate compassion. I'm sure it's at the heart of Hinduism, it's at the heart of Buddhist and Christian practice.
Out of life.
Cultivate empathy and caring for others. Do it. And again, your default mode network does not want you to do that. It just wants you to focus on you. That's your default state. But you challenge that by cultivating this compassion. You do it every single day. After 2 weeks, 3 weeks, it starts to grow. It starts to build. Your observing mind starts to grow. You find yourself no longer feeling lonely. I used to feel very lonely, and not anymore, because every day I pray, I cultivate this compassion, I send this loving energy out to the world, basically.
Makes so much sense. Like I feel like as I told you, I live in Stockholm. Stockholm or Sweden generally, is one of the most individualized parts of the world. Like people are so individual, it's not a community-based system. It's more like I take care of myself, and they contribute to society, but they're very as a person, they're very strong. And I can see this is also one of the parts in the world that have highest metrics when it comes to, or value when it comes to loneliness. Most households have single people living. And it's crazy. It's more like, I would say they are compassionate, but also they might not be hands-on, because they are so stuck about themselves and where are they going to reach in life. And that is exact opposite of working in a group, or thinking in a way that the group have to win, not me, but as a community we need to survive. So compassion does add to the layer of you being one with the group and people contributing to each other. So it's a more depth into that equation.
I mean, look at COVID-19. Look at the pandemic. It forced us to self-isolate, and it forced us to be lonely, right? We had to be lonely to avoid this virus. And look what happened. A surge in anxiety, depression, just a surge in mental health problems. And that just proves that loneliness can cause some major problems. Actually, it can cut about 10 to 15 years off of life expectancy. So loneliness is a big problem. Our Surgeon General in the US, Vivek Murthy, has written a book about it. But loneliness is reversible. You can overcome a loneliness and form very healthy bonds, which will help you in life. And I'm trying to do that every day. Yeah.
I have a question for you. So a lot of people I see, they might already know certain kind of things that you are trying to explain, like compassion solves a lot of loneliness, or you need to be aware about your own thoughts, but also at the same time they're bombarded with regular life, right? Like some people might not like their job, they might not like the friends they have. So for them, it feels like an uphill battle. They're feeling like they are basically trying to fight off their regular daily life. And when we talk about mindfulness, they would be like, we can barely stand on our feet. So how would we do the one above? What would you say to them?
I've been on that journey. I started that journey, and this was a few years ago. The beginning of the journey was extremely difficult. It was like walking in the desert, thirsty, alone, and just having no idea of where this is all headed. But you set the intention, I want to be happy and healthy. You set that intention. You put 10, 15 minutes aside every morning to pray, to meditate. It's very difficult at the beginning. But what you'll notice is after a few weeks, you'll notice a small change. And you keep going. Then a few weeks later, there's a bigger change. Eventually, all of the darkness is gone and light replaces it. But at the very beginning, the light is very dim. It's like a very dim flashlight. But this is something you have to cultivate. It's like if you're getting ready to run a race, right? A marathon or a half marathon, you don't just start running. You have to practice for this. You may have to practice for 2 months, 3 months, build your muscle, build your lungs, exercise till you can. So you have to plan for this and set your intention and walk on the journey. This book will help you find the people out there who will help you, your guides, and keep that intention every day. That's the most important thing. But 10, 15 minutes of mindfulness sounds like a lot of time, but it can prevent stress for 6, 7 hours. And then you end up sleeping better. And then you end up having more energy. Then you end up having more focus. And this all is like a positive feedback. So,
and 15 minutes is like not a lot of time, I would say, because life is kind of like a marathon, and you don't have anyone to complain to, right? Like, who would you complain to? Like, you cannot, once you are an adult, you don't even complain to your parents, because you kind of understand parents as just like you. So there is nowhere to go complain, only to fix your life. And whatever is needed have to be done. And if 15 minutes is going to solve a pain for a decade, that's the way to go. And even if it's not now, at the moment you understand you are in this trouble, in this kind of like downward motion of panic about life, maybe you should start thinking like, maybe I should give it a try. What is there to lose?
Yeah, what is there to lose? And I mentioned there's 11 of these knots or conditions. They're put in a particular order. So it starts with stress, which we all experience. We will always experience. Stress is just a part of life. But coming to prevent stress from happening through breathing exercises, through mindfulness, etc., to lower the level of stress. Because once you're able to lower the level of stress, then you can address the second knot, which is emotional pain. A lot of us have this. I had it from childhood. But coming to understand and resolve your emotional pain through, and there's many different ways, but the biggest is the power of forgiveness, really understanding the root causes of your pain and learning to either self-forgive or forgive others. Completely resolving that emotional pain then allows you to get to the third knot, which is addiction or addictive craving. Very big one. But that one involves the process of surrendering and the process of developing insight, which you will see, whether it's alcoholics who go to Alcoholics Anonymous or people addicted to social media, whatever it is, it's coming to the understanding that this part of my brain has taken over. I need to surrender this part of my brain and walk in the direction with the help of a higher power, helping me get into this direction of being free from this addiction, basically. And that, then leads into all the other knots. But the book helps you one by one tackle these issues and, get to a happier place, basically.
Very systematic as well. When I'm listening, I could see like you're tackling stress immediately, because if with stress, you won't be able to do anything else. And then you go into the root, which is emotional pain from childhood trauma, a lot of this kind of stuff. And then you go to an adult point where you have some addiction. So you're very systematically approaching this as a solution. You can start step by step into that place where you want to go.
Exactly. And so one of the last knots is lifestyle, diet, sleep, and exercise. Because once you've resolved loneliness, negativity, addiction, emotional pain, once you've improved those, it's a lot easier to have a healthy diet and to have healthy exercise. Because a lot of us, we start an exercise regimen, we lose 10, 20 pounds. A few months later, the weight comes back. Why? Because we eat to resolve our emotional pain. We eat because of our loneliness. We have to address those root causes. It makes it a lot easier to have a healthy lifestyle.
Makes sense. And also answers a lot of questions regarding like why people don't stick to things. Because they haven't figured out the basics they have to fix in order to, make it sustainable.
Exactly.
Where could people find your book?
The website is yourdefaultmode.com. And the book is on Amazon. You can buy it in Sweden. I think Sweden has an Amazon store. But yes. Yeah, you can. There's a link there to buy the book, and if you want to read it for free, you can read a chapter for free. And I'll put this podcast on the website as well. You can see my other podcasts there, and all of my social media links are at the bottom of the homepage.
Yeah, and I would also put information in the description. So whoever wants to go and get Hosein's book, you can find it in the description. Also, you can find him all his social media handles below. Before we part away, I have a few last questions for you.
Sure.
So what is next? So you are a practicing drug specialist, a doctor, and who is writing books. What is your next phase in life, or is
It's
there a next phase?
the next phase is continuing the fight against cancer. I'm going to stick to this one. This is my primary mission, and I'm now at a new company, leading this new company. We're going to find even innovative medicines for cancer patients. That is my central focus. And this book is meant to help people. I hope it helps some folks out there. But yeah, that's the main focus is cancer.
Yeah, I think like when the student is ready, the teacher appears. So when people are ready, this book is going to get there in front of them. So, and let it happen wherever it should reach, it will reach eventually. Nice. I think like the interview is done. So I would stop the interview, but we can talk for 5 more minutes before we leave.
Sure. Sounds good. Yeah, that was fun.
So guys, check Hosein out. Go to description and check the book as soon as possible. And have a nice day.